The blood on Nora Grayson's face had barely dried when they tied her wrists and pushed her onto the rickety wooden platform, exposing her to the hungry eyes of men who saw her as nothing more than property to be claimed. The year was 1873, and Paso Robles, California was experiencing the kind of summer heat that made even the most hardened cowboys uncomfortable in their saddles. But the crowd gathered for the auction didn't seem to mind the sweltering conditions, not when there was fresh merchandise to examine. "Next up, gentlemen," bellowed the auctioneer, his voice carrying across the dusty town square. "A fine young woman, just 20 years of age, bit damaged as you can see, but nothing that won't heal. Starting bid is $50. Nora kept her gaze fixed on the ground, refusing to meet the eyes of the men who were evaluating her like livestock. The bruises on her arms were turning a sickly purple, and the cut above her eyebrow stung in the harsh sunlight. Her once beautiful face was marred with evidence of her late husband's final rage before he had gambled away their ranch and then lost his life in a bar fight, leaving her with nothing but his debts. His creditors had wasted no time claiming their due. Among the crowd stood Levi Weston, tall and imposing, his sun-weathered face partially hidden beneath the wide brim of his Stetson. At 32, he had seen more than his fair share of cruelty in the West, but the sight before him made his blood boil. The ranch owner had ridden into town for supplies, not to witness the degradation of another human being. $60, called out a voice from the back. 75, countered another man, a known ranch hand with a reputation for cruelty toward women. Levi's hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip, as he studied Nora's face, the vacant look in her eyes that spoke of a spirit nearly broken. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of mustangs that had been mistreated until their will to fight had almost vanished. $100, came another bid from a man whose whiskey-soaked breath was detectable even from where Levi stood. The auctioneer grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "We have 100. Do I hear 120? Levi stepped forward, his spurs jingling against the hard-packed earth. $300, he announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. A hush fell over the gathering. $300 was a small fortune in Paso Robles, more than enough to buy several healthy horses. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up in surprise. $300 from Mr. Weston, he said, looking around at the suddenly silent crowd. Going once, going twice. $350, came a voice from the side. It belonged to Theodore Blackburn, the owner of the largest cattle operation in the county and a man known for his violent temper. His eyes roamed over Nora's body with undisguised lust. Levi's jaw clenched. $500, he countered without hesitation. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Even Nora looked up, her eyes meeting Levi's for the first time. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, confusion, perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of hope. Blackburn's face darkened with anger. "You're paying too much for damaged goods, Weston," he spat, but he didn't raise the bid. The auctioneer, seeing no further offers, brought down his gavel with a resounding crack. Sold to Levi Weston for $500. Two men roughly pushed Nora toward Levi, who immediately stepped forward to intercept her. When one of them shoved her particularly hard, causing her to stumble, Levi's hand shot out to catch her arm gently. "Easy there," he warned the men, his voice dangerously low. As Nora regained her balance, Levi noticed how she flinched at his touch, her body tensing as if preparing for a blow. The sight made his chest tighten with anger, not at her, but at the men who had reduced her to this fearful state. Blackburn approached them, his boots kicking up dust. "Enjoy your purchase, Weston," he sneered, eyes still fixed on Nora. "When you tire of her, I'll take her off your hands for half what you paid." Levi stepped between Nora and Blackburn, his broad shoulders creating a physical barrier. "That won't be happening, Blackburn," he said quietly. Then, loud enough for everyone gathered to hear, he added, "He'll never touch you again. No one will." The words seemed to penetrate the fog of fear that had surrounded Nora. She looked up at Levi, really seeing him for the first time, the determined set of his jaw, the kindness in his eyes that contradicted the hardness of his exterior. Levi reached for the rope binding Nora's wrists, his touch careful as he untied the knots. As the rope fell away, revealing raw, chafed skin beneath, his expression darkened further. "Can you ride?" he asked her softly. Nora nodded, finding her voice for the first time. "Yes," she whispered, the single word raspy from disuse. Levi led her to his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion that stood patiently at the hitching post. He helped her mount, then swung up behind her, his arms creating a protective cage around her small frame as he took the reins. As they rode out of town, Nora sitting stiffly in front of him, Levi was acutely aware of how she trembled, either from fear or exhaustion, or perhaps both. The road to his ranch stretched before them, winding through rolling hills dotted with oak trees. "I know you have no reason to trust me," Levi said after they had ridden in silence for some time. "But I want you to know that you're safe now. I have a small cabin on my property where you can stay. It's yours for as long as you need it." Nora remained silent, but Levi felt some of the tension leave her body. "You don't belong to me or anyone else," he continued. "I only bid to get you away from there, from them." When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible over the rhythmic thud of the horse's hooves. "Why would you spend so much money on a stranger?" Levi considered his answer carefully. "Because some things are worth more than money," he said finally, "and no person should be sold like cattle." They rode on in silence as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. Levi's ranch came into view, a sprawling property with a main house, several outbuildings and pastures filled with horses. It wasn't the largest spread in the county, but it was well maintained and clearly prosperous. As they approached, a young man emerged from the stable, his face curious as he took in the sight of Nora. "Miguel," Levi called out, "prepare the cabin by the creek. Make sure it's clean and stocked with provisions." Miguel nodded, his eyes lingering on Nora's bruised face before he hurried off to follow Levi's instructions. Levi helped Nora down from the horse, noting how she winced when her feet hit the ground. Without asking permission, he swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the main house. "You need to rest and eat," he said when she stiffened in surprise. "Then we'll get you settled in the cabin." Inside, the house was simple but comfortable, solid furniture, clean surfaces, and the lingering smell of pine and leather. Levi deposited Nora gently in a chair at the kitchen table before moving to the stove, where a pot of stew had been simmering. "Fortunately, Rosa always makes enough to feed an army," he said, ladling the fragrant stew into a bowl. "She's our cook, comes up from town 3 times a week. You'll meet her tomorrow." Nora watched him warily as he placed the bowl in front of her, along with a hunk of fresh bread. Her stomach growled audibly at the sight, and Levi pretended not to notice as she began to eat with barely restrained hunger. While she ate, Levi busied himself gathering supplies: clean bandages, a jar of salve, a basin of warm water. When Nora had finished her meal, he approached cautiously, showing her the items in his hands. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her injured wrists. After a moment of hesitation, Nora extended her arms, allowing Levi to gently clean and dress the raw skin. His hands were calloused but gentle, his movements precise and careful not to cause her additional pain. "Thank you," she murmured when he had finished. It was the first time she had spoken without being prompted. Levi nodded, offering her a small smile. The cabin should be ready by now. Would you like to see it? The cabin was nestled beside a bubbling creek, shaded by ancient oak trees that rustled in the evening breeze. It was small but sturdy, with a porch that wrapped around one side, offering a view of the water. Inside, Miguel had lit the lamps, giving the single room a warm glow. A bed occupied one corner, freshly made with clean linens. A small wood stove stood opposite, ready to provide warmth when needed. A table with 2 chairs sat beneath the window, and a shelf held basic provisions: flour, sugar, coffee, and canned goods. It's not much, Levi said, suddenly conscious of the cabin's simplicity. But it's private. No one will bother you here. Nora moved slowly around the space, trailing her fingertips over the surfaces as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. It's perfect, she whispered. Levi cleared his throat, feeling unexpectedly awkward. There's a trunk at the foot of the bed with some clothing. They belonged to my sister when she visited last summer. You're welcome to use anything that fits. He moved toward the door, eager to give her space. I'll leave you to rest. If you need anything, the main house is just up the path. My room is on the ground floor, east side. Don't hesitate to knock, day or night. As he turned to leave, Nora's voice stopped him. Mr. Weston. He looked back at her, standing small and wounded in the middle of the cabin, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Levi, he corrected gently. Levi, she echoed. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. There's nothing to repay, he assured her. Get some rest, miss. Grayson, she supplied. Nora Grayson, Miss Grayson, he nodded. Things will look better in the morning. As Levi walked back to the main house, he found himself thinking about the woman he had just left in the cabin. There was a strength in her that the bruises couldn't hide, a resilience he recognized and respected. He had seen too many people, men and women alike, broken by the harshness of the West. But Nora Grayson, despite everything she had endured, didn't strike him as someone who would break easily. The morning dawned clear and bright, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the approaching fall. Levi had been up since before sunrise, checking on the new foals in the north pasture. As he made his way back to the main house, he found himself glancing toward the cabin, looking for signs of movement. To his surprise, he saw Nora outside, standing at the edge of the creek. She was wearing one of his sister's dresses, a simple blue garment that hung slightly loose on her frame. Her hair, freed from its previous disheveled state, fell in waves down her back, catching the early morning sunlight. Levi approached slowly, making enough noise with his boots to alert her to his presence. She turned at the sound, and he was struck by how different she looked in just one night, still bruised, still wary, but somehow more present, more alive. Good morning, he greeted, stopping a respectful distance away. I hope you were able to sleep. Nora nodded, her fingers fidgeting with the fabric of her borrowed dress. Better than I have in a long time, she admitted. Thank you for the clothes and for everything else. You're welcome, Levi said, finding himself oddly pleased by her words. I was heading back for breakfast. Would you care to join me? Rosa should have arrived by now, and she makes the best flapjacks in California. He had expected her to decline, to retreat back into the safety of the cabin. Instead, after only a brief hesitation, she nodded. I'd like that. They walked side by side toward the main house, Levi consciously slowing his long strides to match her pace. He was acutely aware of her presence beside him, the subtle floral scent that somehow remained despite her ordeal. The way she carefully observed everything around her, as if committing it all to memory. Rosa, a plump, energetic woman in her 50s with streaks of gray in her dark hair, was indeed in the kitchen. humming as she flipped perfectly golden flapjacks on the large cast-iron griddle. She turned as they entered, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Nora's bruised face but recovering quickly. "Ah, you must be Miss Grayson," she said warmly. "Miguel told me we had a guest. Come, sit. You look like you could use a good meal." Nora seemed taken aback by the immediate acceptance, but allowed herself to be ushered to the table, where Rosa promptly placed a stack of flapjacks drizzled with honey in front of her. "Thank you," Nora murmured, picking up her fork. "Rosa has been with me since I bought this place 6 years ago," Levi explained as he took his own seat. "She keeps everything running smoothly. And make sure this one remembers to eat something other than beef jerky and coffee," Rosa added with an affectionate pat on Levi's shoulder. "Men, they think they can live on air and stubbornness." The comment drew a small smile from Nora, perhaps the first genuine expression of joy Levi had seen on her face. It transformed her features, hinting at the beauty that lay beneath the bruises. As they ate, Rosa kept up a steady stream of conversation, filling the silence with stories of her family in town and the latest gossip from Paso Robles. She didn't ask Nora any questions, for which Levi was grateful. Instead, she treated her like any other guest, offering more food and gently clucking when Nora insisted she couldn't eat another bite. When breakfast was finished, Rosa shooed them both out of the kitchen, declaring that she had work to do. Levi found himself standing with Nora on the porch, unsure of what to say next. "I have to check on a few things around the ranch today," he began, "but please feel free to explore. The property is safe. My men know you're here and will respect your privacy." Nora nodded, her eyes scanning the landscape spread out before them, the corral where several horses grazed, the barn where Miguel was visible leading a mare, the rolling hills beyond dotted with cattle. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "It is," Levi agreed, following her gaze. "It was nothing but scrubland when I bought it. Took years to build it into what you see now." Something flickered in Nora's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or understanding. "You built all this yourself," Levi nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. "Every fence post, every acre of grazing land." "It wasn't easy, but it was worth it." "I understand," Nora said, and Levi sensed that she truly did. "My father had a small farm in Missouri. He taught me that anything worth having is worth working for." It was the most she had revealed about herself since arriving, and Levi found himself eager to know more. But he restrained himself, sensing that pushing too hard would only cause her to retreat. "Your father sounds like a wise man," he said instead. "He was," Nora agreed, a shadow crossing her face. "He died when I was 16. That's when I married James. He seemed kind at first, offering to take care of me after father passed, but once we were married and headed west." She trailed off, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the bruise on her cheek. Levi felt a surge of anger at the unknown James, a man who had taken a vulnerable young woman and twisted her need for security into a trap. "I'm sorry," he said simply, meaning it for all she had lost her father, her home, her sense of safety. Nora looked up at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to determine his sincerity. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded slightly before changing the subject. "Do you have many horses?" she asked, gesturing toward the corral. "About 30, Levi replied, grateful for the shift to safer ground. "I breed and train them. It's the main business of the ranch, though we run cattle too." "May I see them?" The question surprised him, but he nodded, pleased by her interest. "Of course." They spent the morning touring the ranch, Levi showing Nora the horses. He was most proud of a magnificent black stallion named Thunder who had sired many of the younger horses. a gentle mare who had just given birth to twin foals, a rare occurrence that had everyone on the ranch excited, and several yearlings being trained for sale. To Levi's surprise, Nora showed a genuine knowledge of horses, asking intelligent questions and even offering a suggestion about one of the foals that was having trouble nursing. "How do you know so much about horses?" Levi asked as they watched the foal successfully latch onto its mother after implementing Nora's idea. "My father bred draft horses," she explained. "Not as fine as yours, but good, strong animals for farm work. I helped with the foaling every spring since I was old enough to carry a bucket." As the day progressed, Levi noticed subtle changes in Nora, the way she stood a little straighter, spoke a little more freely, even laughed once when a curious foal nuzzled at her pocket looking for treats. By midday, the sun was high and hot, and they sought shade beneath a large oak tree near the corral. Rosa had packed them a simple lunch of cold chicken, bread, and apples, which they ate sitting side by side on a fallen log. "You mentioned you've had this ranch for 6 years," Nora said as she carefully cut a slice from her apple. "Where were you before that?" Levi took a moment before answering, selecting his words with care. "All over, really. I fought in the war Union side. After that, I drifted west, worked as a ranch hand, did some scouting for the army, saved every penny until I could afford a place of my own." "You never married?" The question was asked casually, but Levi detected a note of genuine curiosity. "Never found the right reason to," he replied honestly. "Or the right person, I suppose. What about you? Did you and your husband have any children?" A shadow crossed Nora's face and Levi immediately regretted asking. "No," she said quietly. "James didn't want children, said they were too much trouble, too expensive." She paused, then added in an even softer voice, "Though there was one time when I thought, but after he hit me, I lost it." The admission hung heavy in the air between them. Levi's hand tightened around his water canteen, a surge of rage coursing through him at the man who had hurt her so deeply. He had never been one for violence outside of necessity, but in that moment he was grateful that James was already dead, because the alternative might have led him down a dark path. "I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling woefully inadequate. "No one should have to endure that." Nora looked up at him, her eyes dry but filled with a pain that transcended tears. "The strangest part," she said, "is that there were moments when he could be kind. In the beginning, especially. He would bring me wildflowers or read to me in the evenings. But the kindness became rarer and the cruelty more common, until it was all there was." Levi nodded, understanding more than he cared to admit. He had seen men transformed by drink or desperation, had watched good intentions crumble under the weight of hardship or temptation. The West could be unforgiving that way, stripping men down to their essence, revealing what truly lay beneath the surface. "What will you do now?" he asked after a moment of respectful silence. Nora sighed, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "I don't know. I have no family left, no money of my own. Before the auction, I thought." She trailed off, shaking her head. "What?" Levi prompted gently. "I thought about ending it all," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a steep cliff near the edge of town. I walked there the night James died, after his creditors told me I'd be sold to cover his debts. I stood at the edge for a long time." Levi felt a cold weight settle in his chest at the thought of this woman, so full of quiet strength, being driven to such despair. "What stopped you?" A small, sad smile touched Nora's lips. "The sunrise. It was so beautiful, all pink and gold over the hills. I thought, if there can still be such beauty in a world that's been so cruel, perhaps there's still hope somewhere." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "And then I decided that no matter what happened at the auction, I would survive it. I would find a way to keep going. The simple courage of her words struck Levi deeply. He had faced dangers in his life, bullets in the war, hostile encounters in the wilderness, the everyday risks of ranch life, but he wondered if he would have found the same resolve in her situation. "You're welcome to stay here for as long as you need," he said, meaning every word. "The cabin is yours, and if you'd like to earn your keep, though it's not necessary, we could always use help around the ranch. You clearly know your way around horses." Nora looked at him, surprise evident in her expression. "You would trust me to work with your horses? Why wouldn't I?" Levi returned, genuinely puzzled. "Because you don't know me," she said. "I could be anyone. I could steal from you or damage your property, or are you planning to do any of those things?" Levi interrupted, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "No, of course not," Nora replied, looking affronted at the suggestion. "Then we don't have a problem," Levi concluded. "I'm a fair judge of character, Miss Grayson. Had to be to survive this long. You're not a thief or a vandal. You're a woman who's had a run of terrible luck, and I'm in a position to help. It's as simple as that." For a long moment, Nora simply stared at him, as if trying to reconcile his words with her understanding of how the world worked. Finally, she nodded, a hint of resolve entering her expression. "I would like to work," she said firmly. "I'm not comfortable accepting charity even from someone as kind as you. If you'll have me, I'd like to earn my place here at least until I can figure out what comes next." Levi couldn't help but admire her determination. "Then it's settled. We'll start tomorrow. For now, let's finish our lunch before Rosa comes looking for us. She takes it as a personal insult if her food isn't eaten to the last crumb." The afternoon passed quickly as Levi returned to his duties and Nora retreated to the cabin to rest. By evening, when Levi knocked on her door to invite her to dinner, he found her sitting on the porch, gazing out at the sunset that painted the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he remarked, leaning against the porch railing. "It reminds me of that morning on the cliff," Nora said softly, "when I chose to live." Levi studied her profile, noting how the golden light softened the bruises on her face, illuminating the strength beneath. "I'm glad you made that choice," he said quietly. She turned to look at him, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "So am I." As they walked to the main house together, Levi felt something shift between them, not a dramatic change, but a subtle easing like the first thaw after a long winter. There was still a long road ahead for Nora Grayson, he knew. Healing took time and trust even longer. But for the first time since bringing her to the ranch, he felt a flicker of genuine hope for her future. And perhaps, though he was not yet ready to admit it even to himself, for his own. The days fell into a rhythm as summer gave way to early autumn. Nora began working with the horses, starting with simple tasks like grooming and feeding, but quickly proving her skill with even the more temperamental animals. She had a quiet way about her that seemed to soothe the nervous yearlings, and a firm hand that earned the respect of the older horses. Levi found himself increasingly impressed by her knowledge and abilities. One morning, about 3 weeks after her arrival, he came across her in the barn, carefully treating a cut on the foreleg of Thunder, the stallion that even his most experienced ranch hands approached with caution. "He'll let you tend to him?" Levi asked, keeping his distance so as not to startle the horse. Nora looked up, a strand of hair falling across her face as she applied a poultice to the wound. "We came to an understanding," she said with a small smile. "I explained that I was trying to help, and he decided to believe me." Levi chuckled, impressed despite himself. "You have a gift. Thunder doesn't usually come to an understanding with anyone but me." "Animals know when you respect them," Nora replied, gently wrapping a bandage around the stallion's leg. They can sense fear, but they can also sense kindness. My father always said horses are better judges of character than most people. Your father was a wise man, Levi remarked, not for the first time. He had learned more about Nora's past in the weeks she had been at the ranch, how her mother had died when she was young, how her father had raised her to be independent and strong, teaching her everything he knew about horses and farming. He was, Nora agreed, finishing with the bandage and patting Thunder's flank. The great horse nickered softly, nudging her shoulder with his nose. Though I wonder what he would think of where I've ended up. I think he would be proud, Levi said honestly. You survived something that would have broken many people. Nora's eyes met his, searching for any sign of insincerity. Finding none, she nodded, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. Thank you, she said simply. The bruises on her face had faded to yellowing shadows, barely visible now except in certain light. But Levi knew the deeper wounds, the ones that didn't show on her skin, would take much longer to heal. Still, he had seen changes in her over the weeks. She stood taller, spoke more freely, and even laughed sometimes, a sound that never failed to send an unexpected warmth through his chest. Rosa mentioned she's making her special stew for dinner, Levi said, changing the subject to safer ground. The one with the dumplings you liked. The one you claim she only makes when I ask for it, you mean, Nora replied with a hint of teasing in her voice. Levi laughed, enjoying this new side of her that had begun to emerge. It's true. I've been asking for that stew for years, and she always has some excuse. You bat those eyelashes once, and suddenly she's chopping vegetables and rolling dough. Perhaps you should try the eyelashes, Nora suggested, her eyes twinkling with mischief. The joke caught Levi off guard, and he found himself laughing harder than he had in a long time. Now there's an image that will haunt Rosa's nightmares. Their shared laughter echoed in the barn, causing Thunder to toss his head in confusion at the unfamiliar sound. As their mirth subsided, Levi found himself studying Nora's face, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, the slight dimple in her right cheek, the golden highlights in her hair caught by the sunlight streaming through the barn doors. He quickly looked away, suddenly conscious of his staring. I should check on the men working in the north pasture, he said, clearing his throat. They're repairing the fence where that storm brought down the oak tree last week. Nora nodded, turning back to Thunder. I'll finish up here and then help Miguel with the new foal. He mentioned the little one seemed colicky this morning. As Levi walked away from the barn, he found himself thinking about the changes in his life since Nora's arrival. The ranch had always been his sanctuary, a place of order and purpose. But now, with her presence, it felt different, warmer somehow, more like the home he had always intended it to be. The thought both pleased and unsettled him. He had spent years building his life around independence, around the freedom to make decisions without having to consider anyone else's needs or wants. And yet, he increasingly found himself looking forward to the moments spent in Nora's company, planning his days with her in mind, wondering what might make her smile. That evening at dinner, as Rosa served her famous stew with a wink at Nora, Levi watched the interaction between the two women with a sense of contentment. Rosa had taken Nora under her wing, teaching her the recipes she had brought from her childhood in Mexico, sharing stories of her own early days in California. In return, Nora helped with the household tasks, learning Spanish phrases and offering insights from her upbringing in Missouri. You should take Miss Nora to the Harvest Festival in town next week, Rosa suggested as she placed a basket of warm bread on the table. It would do her good to see something besides this ranch, and you too, for that matter. Levi raised an eyebrow at the cook's boldness, but before he could respond, Nora spoke up. "A festival?" she asked, her interest evident. "What kind of festival?" "Oh, it is wonderful," Rosa assured her, warming to her topic. "There is music, dancing, food from all over. The whole town comes together to celebrate the harvest before winter. And this year, they are having a horse race as well." Levi could see the mix of excitement and apprehension on Nora's face. "I'm not sure if going back to town is a good idea just yet," he said carefully, remembering the circumstances under which he had brought her to the ranch. Nora's expression sobered as she understood his meaning. "You're right," she said quietly. "People would recognize me, remember what happened at the auction. It would be uncomfortable." Rosa looked between them, clearly sensing the undercurrent of tension. "Not everyone from town was at that terrible event," she said firmly. "And those who were should be ashamed, not you, Nina." Nora offered a small smile at the term of endearment Rosa had taken to using for her. "Thank you, Rosa, but I think it's too soon." Later that night, after Rosa had gone home to her family in town and the ranch had settled into its nighttime quiet, Levi found himself unable to sleep. The conversation at dinner had stirred something in him, a protectiveness toward Nora, but also a growing awareness that he couldn't shield her from the world forever. Eventually, she would need to decide what kind of life she wanted to build for herself. He stepped out onto the porch of the main house, breathing in the cool night air. To his surprise, he saw a figure sitting by the creek. Nora, her hair loose around her shoulders, illuminated by the nearly full moon. For a moment, Levi considered returning inside, giving her the privacy she had clearly sought. But something, concern, curiosity, or perhaps something else entirely, propelled him toward the creek. She looked up as he approached, not startled but not entirely welcoming either. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "No," Levi admitted, stopping a few feet away. "May I join you?" Nora nodded, making room on the large rock where she sat. They remained in silence for a time, listening to the gentle murmur of the creek and the occasional hoot of an owl from the nearby trees. "I've been thinking about what Rosa said," Nora finally spoke, "about the festival." Levi turned to look at her, her profile silvered by the moonlight. "It was just a suggestion. You don't have to go if you're not comfortable." "But that's just it," Nora said, frustration edging her voice. "How long can I hide away here, avoiding the town and its people? This isn't a real life, it's just existing." The words struck Levi harder than he expected, a reminder that for all her growing comfort at the ranch, Nora still viewed her situation as temporary, a way station on the journey to whatever came next. "What would a real life look like for you?" he asked, genuinely curious. Nora was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the rippling water of the creek. "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. "For so long, my life was about surviving each day with James. Before that, it was helping my father with the farm. I've never really had the chance to decide for myself what I want." "And now," Levi prompted gently. "Now," Nora sighed, her breath visible in the cool night air. "Now I know I want safety, peace, work that I enjoy and that has meaning." She paused, then added softly, "And someday, perhaps, a family of my own. Children." The longing in her voice was palpable, and Levi found himself imagining it, Nora with children, teaching them about horses, her face alight with joy as she watched them grow. The image was surprisingly vivid and unexpectedly affecting. "Those are good things to want," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "But they require facing the world," Nora continued, turning to look at him directly. "I can't hide at your ranch forever, living in fear of what people might think or say." "It doesn't have to be forever," Levi agreed, though the thought of her leaving someday created an uncomfortable tightness in his chest. "But it doesn't have to be next week, either. Healing takes time." Nora studied his face in the moonlight, her expression thoughtful. "You've been so kind to me, Levi. I don't know if I've properly thanked you for everything you've done." "You don't need to thank me," Levi said, embarrassed by her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Nora shook her head firmly. "They wouldn't. Most men would have either left me to my fate or expected certain things in return for their help." The implication hung in the air between them, and Levi felt a surge of anger at the thought of men who would take advantage of a woman in her vulnerable position. "I would never," he began, but Nora interrupted him with a gentle touch on his arm. "I know," she said softly. "That's what makes you different. Why I've come to trust you." Her hand remained on his arm, warm even through the fabric of his shirt. Levi was acutely aware of her closeness, of the scent of lavender that clung to her hair, of the way her eyes reflected the moonlight. For a brief, suspended moment, he thought about closing the distance between them, about how it would feel to kiss her. The impulse was so strong it startled him, and he quickly stood, breaking the connection. "It's getting late," he said, his voice gruff with suppressed emotion. "We should both try to get some sleep." If Nora noticed his sudden withdrawal, she gave no sign of it. "You're right," she agreed, rising from the rock. "Thank you for listening." As they walked back in silence, Levi toward the main house and Nora to her cabin, he couldn't help but wonder if he had imagined the moment between them, or if she had felt it too, that brief, electric possibility of something more. The thought followed him into restless dreams, where Nora's smile and the touch of her hand on his arm replayed in endless variations. The next morning brought a flurry of activity to the ranch. A buyer from San Francisco had arrived unexpectedly to look at several of the yearlings Levi had been training for sale. Grateful for the distraction from his confusing thoughts about Nora, Levi threw himself into the business at hand, showing the well-dressed gentleman around the property and demonstrating the quality of his stock. Nora kept her distance during the negotiations, focusing on her work with the horses in the far pasture. But when the buyer expressed interest in a particularly spirited filly that no one had been able to properly saddle, Levi found himself seeking her out. "The bay filly Firefly, Mr. Harrison wants to see her under saddle," Levi explained. "But she's been giving me Gel and the boys trouble all week. I thought perhaps you might have better luck with her." Nora hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of performing for a stranger. "I'm not sure. You're the only one she responds to," Levi said truthfully. "And this could be an important sale for the ranch." Something in his tone must have conveyed the significance of the moment, because Nora straightened her shoulders and nodded. "I'll try." Levi watched with a mixture of pride and anxiety as Nora approached the filly in the corral, speaking to her in low, soothing tones. Mr. Harrison stood beside him, skepticism evident in his expression, as he observed the slender woman attempting what two grown men had failed to accomplish. But Nora moved with a quiet confidence, each gesture deliberate and calm. She let the filly sniff her hands, then her hair, establishing a connection before even reaching for the saddle blanket. When she finally placed the saddle on the filly's back, the horse tensed but didn't buck, seeming to trust the woman despite her natural skittishness. "Remarkable," Mr. Harrison murmured as Nora swung herself into the saddle and began to guide the filly around the corral. "I've never seen anyone handle a horse quite like that, especially not a woman." Levi felt a surge of pride as he watched Nora and the filly move together, becoming more fluid and coordinated with each circuit of the corral. "Miss Grayson has a gift with horses," he said, not bothering to hide his admiration. "Indeed she does," Harrison agreed. "In fact, I'd be interested in hiring her services. I have several difficult horses at my stable in San Francisco that could benefit from her touch." The statement caught Levi off guard. Hiring her? Yes, as a trainer, Harrison clarified. I'd pay well, of course. A woman with her skills could make a very comfortable living in the city. The thought of Nora leaving for San Francisco created an unexpected hollow feeling in Levi's chest. Before he could formulate a response, Nora had completed her demonstration and was dismounting, her face flushed with success. She's a fine horse, Nora told Harrison as she approached, leading the now docile filly. Spirited but intelligent, she just needs patience and consistent handling. Harrison nodded, clearly impressed. Miss Grayson, I was just telling Mr. Weston that I'd be interested in employing your talents in San Francisco. I have a stable with several valuable but problematic horses that could benefit from your approach. Nora's eyes widened in surprise, then darted to Levi's face. Whatever she saw there made her hesitate. That's very kind of you, Mr. Harrison, but I'm committed here at the moment. Harrison looked between the two of them, a knowing smile touching his lips. I see. Well, the offer stands should your circumstances change. In the meantime, I'll take the filly and the two geldings we discussed. They'll make fine additions to my stable. The business was concluded by midday, with Harrison departing with his newly purchased horses, and a substantial payment that would see the ranch through the winter months comfortably. As the dust from his carriage settled on the road, Levi turned to Nora, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since declining Harrison's offer. You didn't have to say no on my account, he said, trying to keep his tone neutral despite the relief he felt at her decision to stay. Nora looked up at him, her expression unreadable. It wasn't just for you, she said quietly. I'm not ready for a city like San Francisco or to be on my own just yet. But someday you might be, Levi said, the words tasting bitter even as he spoke them. Nora was silent for a moment, her gaze drifting to the horizon where Harrison's carriage had disappeared. Someday, perhaps, she agreed, but not today. That evening, as they sat on the porch of the main house watching the sunset, Levi found himself thinking about Harrison's offer and what it represented a future for Nora beyond the ranch, beyond the protective bubble he had created for her. It was a reminder that she was not merely a wounded bird he had rescued, but a woman of skill and determination who would eventually want to make her own way in the world. I've been thinking about the festival, he said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. Nora looked at him, surprise evident in her expression. Oh, Rosa was right. It would be good for you for both of us to go into town, to start. Building something beyond just the ranch. Building what? Nora asked, her voice soft in the gathering twilight. Levi struggled to articulate what he meant. A life, he said finally, not just existing as you put it. Nora studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Are you sure, after what happened at the auction? People will talk, Levi acknowledged. They always do. But holding yourself apart from life because of fear or shame gives power to those who would judge you, and they don't deserve that power. A small smile touched Nora's lips. When did you become so wise, Levi Weston? Levi chuckled, feeling the tension ease between them. I've had my share of judgments to face. The war left many of us with scars, not all of them visible. Nora's smile faded, replaced by a look of genuine curiosity. You don't talk much about the war. No, Levi agreed, his gaze turning distant. Some memories are better left buried. But as he looked at Nora's face, open and attentive in the fading light, he found himself wanting to share a part of himself he usually kept hidden. I was at Gettysburg, he said quietly. Saw things no man should see, did things. He trailed off, shaking his head. When it was over, I couldn't go back to Pennsylvania to the family farm. Everything looked the same, but I was different, so I came west looking for something. Space, maybe, or redemption. Nora reached out, her hand covering his where it rested on the arm of his chair. "Did you find it?" Levi looked down at their joined hands, then up at the sunset painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson. "I found peace, at least. Purpose. This land has a way of putting things in perspective. Makes a man's troubles seem small against the backdrop of these mountains, this sky." "Yes," Nora agreed softly. "I've felt that too since coming here." They sat in companionable silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, leaving a soft purple glow in its wake. Nora's hand remained on his, neither of them acknowledging the contact but neither pulling away either. "So," Nora said finally, "the Harvest Festival." Levi smiled, grateful for her willingness to consider it. "Next Saturday, we could take the bugboard, make a day of it." Nora nodded, a hint of determination in her expression. "Yes, it's time I stopped hiding." The day of the Harvest Festival dawned clear and crisp, with just enough autumn chill in the air to require a light jacket, but warm enough to promise a pleasant afternoon. Levi had risen early, checking on the horses and giving instructions to Miguel about the care of the ranch in his absence. He found himself uncharacteristically nervous about the day ahead. It wasn't just concern for how Nora might be received in town, though that weighed on his mind. It was also the awareness that this was something different from their usual interactions, not work on the ranch, not the daily routine they had established, but something that felt suspiciously like courting. The thought stopped him in his tracks as he was hitching the horses to the buckboard. Was that what he was doing? Courting Nora Grayson. He hadn't allowed himself to examine his feelings too closely, telling himself that his interest was merely concern for her welfare, admiration for her strength and skill with horses. But as he watched her emerge from her cabin, wearing a dress he hadn't seen before, a deep green that complemented her auburn hair, which she had arranged in a style more elaborate than her usual simple braid, Levi knew he had been deceiving himself. His interest went far beyond mere concern or admiration. "Rosa helped me with the dress," Nora explained as she approached, a hint of self-consciousness in her smile. "She said my usual attire wouldn't do for the festival." "You look beautiful," Levi said before he could think better of it, then felt heat rise to his face at his own boldness. Nora's cheeks flushed with pleasure and she ducked her head slightly. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." Levi glanced down at his own clothing, clean trousers, his best shirt, a vest he rarely wore except for business in town, and felt oddly pleased by her approval. "Shall we?" he asked, offering his hand to help her up into the buckboard. The ride into town was filled with easy conversation, Nora pointing out wildflowers along the way and Levi sharing stories about the early days of his ranch. As they approached Paso Robles, Levi could sense Nora growing tenser, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "We don't have to stay long if you're uncomfortable," he assured her, slowing the horses as the first buildings came into view. Nora took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. "No, I want to do this. I need to." The town was transformed for the festival, with colorful banners hanging from buildings and stalls set up along the main street selling everything from handcrafted goods to fresh produce. A band played lively music in the town square, where several couples were already dancing despite the early hour. As Levi helped Nora down from the buckboard, he noticed how she scanned the crowd, her body tense with anxiety. He placed a reassuring hand on the small of her back, a gesture that felt both protective and intimate. "Let's start with Rosa's stall," he suggested. "She mentioned she'd be selling her tamales and sweet bread today." Nora nodded gratefully, and they made their way through the throng, Levi nodding at acquaintances but not stopping to chat. He could feel curious eyes following them, heard the whispers as people recognized Nora from the auction and speculated about her presence at his side. Rosa's welcoming smile was a relief when they reached her stall, which was doing brisk business selling her famous tamales. "Ah, you came," she exclaimed, coming around to embrace Nora warmly. "And looking so pretty in that dress. I knew the color would suit you." Nora returned the hug, visibly relaxing in the older woman's presence. "The festival is wonderful, Rosa. Everything looks so festive." "Wait until you try the food," Rosa said with a wink. "And later there will be dancing and the horse race, of course." They sampled Rosa's tamales and wandered among the stalls, gradually making their way around the festival. Levi was pleased to see that, while there were certainly curious glances and whispers, most people greeted them politely, some even engaging Nora in conversation about the ranch and the horses. By midday, Nora seemed to have shed most of her initial anxiety, laughing at the antics of children playing games and admiring the handiwork at a quilting demonstration. Levi found himself watching her more than the festival, captivated by the way her eyes lit up with delight at each new discovery, the sound of her laughter carrying over the general din of the crowd. "Weston." The voice came from behind them, causing Levi to turn sharply. Theodore Blackburn stood there, his expression a mixture of contempt and curiosity as his gaze moved from Levi to Nora. "I see you've brought your purchase to town." Levi felt Nora stiffen beside him, saw how her face paled at the reminder of the auction. A surge of anger rose in him, but before he could respond, Nora spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Mr. Blackburn," she said with a slight nod, "I hope you're enjoying the festival." Blackburn's eyes narrowed at her composed response. "Surprising to see you here, Miss Grayson." Thought Weston would keep his investment locked away at that ranch of his. "Miss Grayson is not an investment," Levi said coldly. "She's a guest at my ranch and an extremely talented horse trainer." "Is that what they're calling it these days?" Blackburn sneered. Levi took a step forward, his hand instinctively moving toward his hip where his revolver would usually be, though he had left it at home for the festival. Nora's hand on his arm stopped him. "Mr. Blackburn," she said, her voice stronger now, carrying to the people nearby who had fallen silent to watch the confrontation. "I understand that you're disappointed you couldn't purchase me at the auction, but I assure you, it's for the best. I wouldn't have been nearly as accommodating as your livestock." A ripple of shocked laughter went through the onlookers. Blackburn's face darkened with anger and embarrassment. I'd advise you to choose your next words very carefully," Levi interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "Miss Grayson is under my protection, and I won't tolerate any disrespect toward her." For a tense moment, it seemed Blackburn might escalate the situation. But a glance at the crowd, many of whom were openly supportive of Levi and Nora, appeared to make him reconsider. With a final glare, he turned and stalked away. "Well," Nora said, a slight tremor in her voice betraying her outward composure, "that was unpleasant." Levi looked down at her, concern and admiration warring in his expression. "Are you all right?" Nora nodded, though her face was still pale. "Yes. Though I think I could use a moment away from the crowd." Levi led her to a quiet spot beneath a large oak tree on the edge of the town square, where they could still see the festival activities, but were removed from the immediate press of people. Nora leaned against the trunk of the tree, taking deep breaths to steady herself. "You were remarkable back there," Levi said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Not many people stand up to Blackburn like that." A small, proud smile touched Nora's lips. "I surprised myself, honestly. A few months ago, I would have withered under that kind of confrontation." "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for," Levi told her. "Always have been, I suspect." Nora looked up at him, something vulnerable and questioning in her eyes. "Levi, why did you really bid for me that day?" The truth. The directness of the question caught him off guard. He had given her partial truths before about his moral objections to the auction, his desire to help someone in need. But standing here, with her looking at him so intently, he found himself wanting to offer something more honest. "When I saw you on that platform," he began slowly, "with those bruises on your face but still standing tall, still holding on to your dignity despite everything, I saw someone who deserved better than what life had given her, someone worth fighting for." He paused, then added more quietly, "I didn't know you then, but I wanted to. And every day since, that feeling has only grown stronger." The admission hung in the air between them, more revealing than he had intended. Nora's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment Levi feared he had said too much, pushed too far. But then she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, could smell the faint lavender scent of her hair. "No one has ever fought for me before," she whispered. "Not like that. I would do it again," Levi said, his voice rough with emotion. "1,000 times over." Something shifted in Nora's expression, a softening, a decision made. She reached up, her hand gently touching his cheek. "Levi Weston," she said softly, "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words sent a shock through him, a jolt of joy so intense it was almost painful. For a moment he couldn't speak, could only look at her in wonder. "If that's not something you want," Nora continued, uncertainty creeping into her voice at his silence, "I understand. You've already done so much for me, and I wouldn't expect—" Levi found his voice at last, his hand covering hers where it rested against his cheek. "Nora," he interrupted gently, "I fell for you weeks ago. I just didn't have the courage to admit it, even to myself." The smile that bloomed on her face was like sunrise after the longest night, radiant with joy and hope. Levi couldn't help but respond in kind, feeling a happiness he hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down. Nora rose to meet him, and when their lips touched, it was with a tenderness that belied the intensity of emotion behind it. Her hand slid from his cheek to the back of his neck, drawing him closer as the kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent, more honest. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Levi rested his forehead against hers. "That was worth waiting for," he murmured. Nora laughed softly, the sound vibrating through him where their bodies touched. "Yes, it was." From the town square came the sound of the band striking up a waltz. Levi stepped back slightly, offering Nora his hand with a formal bow that made her smile widen. "Miss Grayson, would you do me the honor of this dance?" Nora placed her hand in his, a teasing glint in her eye. "Mr. Weston, I would be delighted." They returned to the festival, joining the other couples circling the makeshift dance floor. Levi was acutely aware of the eyes on them, of the speculation their obvious closeness would generate. But for once, he didn't care what anyone thought. All that mattered was Nora in his arms, her hand in his, her smile directed up at him as he guided her through the steps of the waltz. As the day progressed, they participated fully in the festival activities, cheering at the horse race, which Levi admitted he could have won if he had entered Thunder, sampling foods from the various stalls, even joining in a group dance that had everyone linking arms and spinning in circles until they were dizzy with laughter. By the time they headed back to the ranch, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road. Nora sat closer to Levi on the buckboard than she had on the journey into town, their shoulders touching companionably. "Thank you for today," she said as the ranch came into view. "For convincing me to go, for standing up for me with Blackburn, for everything." Levi smiled, his heart fuller than he could remember it being in a very long time. Thank you for being brave enough to face it all." As they reached the ranch and Levi helped Nora down from the buckboard, their hands lingered together longer than necessary. The air between them was charged with possibility, with unspoken questions about what came next. "Would you like to come in?" Levi asked, gesturing toward the main house. "I could make some coffee, or there's probably some of that apple pie Rosa left yesterday." Nora hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." Inside, the house was quiet and dark until Levi lit the lamps, casting a warm glow over the familiar space. As he moved to the kitchen to prepare the coffee, Nora wandered to the bookshelf in the sitting room, running her fingers over the spines of his modest collection. "You have quite a few books for a rancher," she observed. Levi smiled as he set the coffee pot on the stove. "Reading was my escape during the war. Whenever we weren't marching or fighting, I had my nose in a book. The habit stuck." "My father used to read to me every night," Nora said, pulling out a volume of poetry. "Even when I was old enough to read for myself, it was our special time together." As the coffee brewed, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma, they settled on the sofa, Nora tucked against Levi's side as naturally as if they had been sitting this way for years. She opened the book of poetry, finding a page marked with a pressed wildflower. "This was your place?" she asked, touching the dried flower gently. Levi nodded, a bit embarrassed to have his sentimentality discovered. "It reminded me of a field near our farm in Pennsylvania. My mother loved wildflowers." Nora's expression softened as she read the poem on the marked page. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all," Levi continued from memory. Nora looked up at him, surprise and pleasure in her expression. "You know Emily Dickinson?" "I told you. I read a lot during the war," Levi said with a smile. "Poetry made more sense than what was happening around us most days." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sounds the ticking of the clock on the mantel and the gentle bubbling of the coffee pot. "Levi," Nora said eventually, her voice thoughtful, "what happens now? With us, I mean." It was the question that had been hovering unspoken between them since that moment under the oak tree. Levi took a deep breath, considering his answer carefully. "Whatever we want to happen," he said finally. "There's no rush to decide anything. We can take our time, figure things out as we go." Nora nodded, but he could sense a certain hesitation in her. "It's just, my experience with marriage wasn't. It wasn't good, Levi. The thought of being someone's wife again, of being that vulnerable." "Hey," Levi said gently, turning to face her more fully. "I'm not James, and I would never, ever expect you to be anything other than what you are: strong, independent, capable. If we decide someday that marriage is right for us, it would be as partners, equals. But if that's not what you want, ever, I can accept that too." The relief in Nora's eyes was palpable. "Thank you for understanding. It's not that I don't care for you or that I can't imagine a future with you. It's just, you need time," Levi finished for her, "and I can give you that. All I ask is that you stay here at the ranch, working with the horses, being part of my life in whatever way feels right to you." Nora's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I'd like that. Very much." The coffee pot chose that moment to signal its readiness with a final gurgle. Levi reluctantly pulled away to pour them each a cup, adding a splash of cream to Nora's, as he had learned she preferred. As they sipped their coffee and continued to talk about books, about the festival, about their hopes for the ranch in the coming seasons, Levi felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place that he hadn't even known were missing. Later, as he walked Nora back to her cabin in the moonlight, their hands intertwined, he realized that for all his talk of giving her time, he already knew what he wanted. He wanted Nora Grayson in his life not as someone he had rescued or as a talented employee, but as his partner in every sense of the word. But he would wait, would give her all the time she needed to heal and to discover for herself what she truly wanted. Because some things, as he had told her the day of the auction, were worth more than money. And Nora Grayson's heart was priceless beyond measure. The changing seasons brought new rhythms to the ranch. As autumn deepened, the days grew shorter and the nights cooler. The trees along the creek turned vibrant shades of gold and crimson before shedding their leaves, which Nora collected to press between the pages of the books Levi lent her. Their relationship evolved with the same natural progression as the seasons. What had begun with a kiss at the harvest festival deepened into something more profound, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared work, and growing affection. Nora remained in the cabin by the creek, valuing her independence even as she spent more and more time in the main house with Levi. They fell into comfortable routines: breakfast together before the day's work, evenings spent reading aloud to each other by the fire, Sunday rides across the ranch property to check on the cattle in the high pastures. By mid-November, when the first frost silvered the grass and made the creek edges crackle with thin ice in the mornings, Levi had begun to think about Christmas and what it might mean to celebrate the holiday with Nora. It would be her first Christmas away from her previous life, and he wanted to make it special. One crisp morning, as they rode side by side checking on a new fence line, Levi broached the subject. "I was thinking about Christmas," he began, watching Nora's profile against the backdrop of the distant mountains. "Rosa usually cooks a big dinner, and some of the hands who don't have family nearby join us. I'd like to do something special this year with you here." Nora smiled, her cheeks pink from the cold air. "That sounds wonderful. I haven't really celebrated Christmas since my father died. James wasn't one for holidays." The mention of her late husband no longer brought the shadow to her eyes that it once had, Levi noted with satisfaction. Time and distance had dulled the pain of those memories, though he knew they would never disappear entirely. "What did you and your father do for Christmas?" Levi asked, genuinely curious about the traditions she had grown up with. Nora's expression softened with nostalgia. "We'd cut a small pine tree from the woods behind our farm and decorate it with homemade ornaments: pine cones dipped in wax, paper stars, strings of dried berries. And on Christmas Eve, we'd read the nativity story from the Bible, and then exchange one small gift each. The rest would wait for Christmas morning." "That sounds perfect," Levi said, already envisioning how they might recreate those traditions at the ranch. "We could ride out to the North Ridge. There are some nice young pines up there that could use thinning anyway." Nora's smile widened. "I'd like that very much." They continued their inspection of the fence line, the conversation turning to more practical matters: which horses were ready for sale, whether the winter feed supplies were adequate, how Miguel was progressing with his training of the new colts. As they crested a small hill, Levi pulled his horse to a stop, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. Nora followed his line of sight and gasped softly. A herd of wild horses moved across the valley below, perhaps 20 strong, led by a magnificent black stallion. They were a rare sight, even in this relatively undeveloped area, as most wild herds had been captured or driven further into the mountains by the expanding ranches and settlements. "They're beautiful," Nora breathed, watching the animals move with fluid grace through the golden grass. Levi nodded, equally captivated by the sight. "That stallion has been leading this herd for years. I've spotted them a few times, but never this close to the ranch." "You've never tried to capture them?" Nora asked, glancing at him curiously. Levi shook his head. "Some things should remain free," he said simply. Besides, they keep to the high country most of the time. They only come down when the snow pushes them to lower elevations for grazing. They sat in silence for several minutes, watching the wild herd. Levi found his gaze drawn not to the horses, magnificent as they were, but to Nora's face, the wonder in her eyes, the soft curve of her lips, the wisps of hair that had escaped her braid and danced in the breeze. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "Nothing," Levi said, smiling. "Just thinking how lucky I am." Nora's cheeks, already pink from the cold, darkened further. After months at the ranch, working outdoors daily, her skin had taken on a healthy glow, and the last traces of the bruises from her previous life had long since faded. She looked strong, vibrant, alive in a way she hadn't when he first brought her to the ranch. "I'm the lucky one," she countered softly. "You gave me a second chance at life, Levi. A chance to discover who I really am, what I really want." "And have you?" Levi asked, suddenly serious. "Discovered what you want?" Nora held his gaze, her eyes clear and certain. "Yes," she said simply. "I have." The moment stretched between them, charged with meaning. Then the lead stallion of the wild herd let out a piercing neigh, breaking the spell. The horses began to move away, disappearing into a copse of trees at the far end of the valley. "We should get back," Levi said, reluctant to end their time alone together, but aware of the lengthening shadows as the winter sun began its early descent. As they rode back toward the ranch, side by side in companionable silence, Levi found himself thinking about Nora's words. She knew what she wanted now. And while she hadn't said explicitly that what she wanted was him, the way she had looked at him, the certainty in her voice, gave him hope. That night, after dinner with Rosa and Miguel, who had stayed late to discuss the training schedule for the following week, Levi and Nora sat before the fire in the main house. It had become their custom in the colder evenings, Levi in his armchair, Nora curled up on the sofa with a quilt Rosa had made, often with a book shared between them. But tonight, neither seemed inclined toward reading. Instead, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance in the hearth. "I've been thinking," Nora said finally, her voice soft but clear in the quiet room, "about the cabin." Levi looked over at her, curious about the direction of her thoughts. "What about it?" "It's going to be very cold there soon," she said, her eyes fixed on the fire. "The wood stove helps, but it's not like being in the main house." Levi nodded, feeling a stirring of anticipation. "That's true. The cabin wasn't built for deep winter. I usually close it up from December through February." "Where would I stay then?" Nora asked, finally looking up to meet his gaze. The question hung in the air between them, layered with meaning beyond the practical consideration of winter accommodations. "There's plenty of room here," Levi said carefully. "The guest bedroom upstairs is comfortable. Or, Nora prompted when he trailed off. Levi took a deep breath, deciding to take the risk. "Or you could stay with me in my room, as my wife if you'd want that." The words were out before he could second-guess them, a proposal both impulsive and inevitable. He had been carrying the thought in his heart for weeks, waiting for the right moment, the right words. Nora's eyes widened, and for a heart-stopping moment, Levi feared he had misjudged, had pushed too far, too fast. But then she unfolded herself from the sofa and crossed to his chair, kneeling beside it to look up into his face. "Are you asking me to marry you, Levi Weston?" she asked, her voice steady despite the emotion shining in her eyes. "Yes," Levi said simply. "I love you, Nora. I want to build a life with you if that's what you want too." Nora reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with a tenderness that made his heart ache. "After James, I thought I'd never want to be anyone's wife again. I was afraid of losing myself, of being trapped, of being hurt." "I understand if you're not ready," Levi began, but Nora placed a finger gently against his lips to silence him. "Let me finish," she said with a small smile. "I was afraid, but being here with you, seeing how you respect me, how you value my independence and my abilities, it's shown me that marriage doesn't have to be what I experienced before. It can be a partnership between equals, built on love and trust." Hope bloomed in Levi's chest, strong and bright. "Is that a yes, then?" Nora's smile widened, radiant with joy. "Yes, Levi Weston, I will marry you." Levi didn't hesitate. He pulled her up into his lap, his arms encircling her as his lips found hers in a kiss that spoke of promise and passion, and a future they would build together. Nora responded with equal fervor, her hands threading through his hair, her body warm and yielding against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Levi rested his forehead against hers. "When?" he asked simply. Nora laughed softly. "Eager are we to make you my wife." "Yes, very," Levi admitted without shame, "but we can wait as long as you need." "Spring, summer, next year, Christmas," Nora interrupted. "Let's get married on Christmas Day. It feels right somehow. A new beginning at the end of the year." Levi smiled, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "Christmas it is then. We can ride into town tomorrow to speak with the minister, make arrangements. And perhaps while we're there," Nora suggested, a teasing light in her eyes, "we could stop by the general store. I saw some lovely ribbons last time we were in town that would make beautiful decorations for our Christmas tree." "Our tree," Levi repeated, loving the sound of those words. "Our Christmas, our future." Nora nestled her head against his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. "Yes," she whispered. "Ours." They remained that way for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms before the fire, talking softly about their plans for the wedding, for Christmas, for the years to come. It would be small. They decided just Rosa and Miguel, the ranch hands, perhaps a few friends from town. Nora would need a dress and Levi a new suit. They would ask the minister to come to the ranch rather than having the ceremony in town. As the fire burned low, casting the room in a warm, golden glow, Levi found himself thinking of that day at the auction, of Nora standing bruised and defiant on the platform. He could never have imagined then that his impulsive bid would lead to this moment of perfect contentment, of love found and future promised. "What are you thinking about?" Nora asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "About how far we've come," Levi answered honestly. "About how sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best ones if you're brave enough to keep going." Nora nodded, understanding in her eyes. "My father used to say that God never closes a door without opening a window. I didn't believe that after he died or during my years with James. But now—" "Now," Levi prompted. "Now I think he might have been right after all," she finished softly. "Because losing everything led me to you, and you're more than I ever dared hope for." As Levi held her close, murmuring words of love and promise, he silently thanked whatever fate or providence had led him to town that day, had placed him in that crowd, had given him the means and the courage to act. From the darkest moment of Nora's life had come the brightest opportunity for both of them, a chance at love, at happiness, at a future built on mutual respect and shared dreams. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, dusting the ranch in a blanket of pristine white. But inside, by the dying embers of the fire, Levi and Nora found all the warmth they needed in each other's arms, in the promise of Christmas, and in the knowledge that what had begun as an act of rescue had transformed into something far more powerful, a love that would sustain them through all the seasons to come. The wedding preparations consumed the ranch in the weeks leading up to Christmas. Rosa took charge with cheerful authority, insisting on baking the wedding cake herself and enlisting the help of her daughters to sew Nora's dress. Miguel and the other ranch hands, caught up in the festive atmosphere, decorated the main house with pine boughs and red ribbons, their usual stoicism giving way to good-natured teasing of the soon-to-be married couple. Levi found himself busier than ever, dividing his time between the usual ranch responsibilities and the special tasks required for the wedding and Christmas celebrations. He rode into town multiple times to arrange for the minister, to order supplies for the feast Rosa was planning, and to select a gift worthy of his bride. The last errand proved the most challenging. What could he possibly give Nora that would express the depth of his feelings, the promise of their future together? Nothing in the general store's limited selection seemed adequate, and he returned to the ranch, empty-handed and frustrated. "You look troubled," Nora observed as they sat at dinner the week before Christmas. "Is everything all right with the wedding plans?" Levi nodded, embarrassed to admit the source of his concern. "Everything's fine. The minister is confirmed, Rosa has the menu planned, and Miguel assures me the house will be ready." "But something's bothering you," Nora persisted, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Tell me." Under her gentle inquiry, Levi confessed his dilemma. "I've been trying to find the perfect wedding gift for you, but nothing seems right. Nothing seems enough." Nora's expression softened, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Levi Weston, you've already given me everything I could possibly want: a home, a purpose, your love. What more could I need? Something special," Levi insisted. "Something that's just for you, not for us or the ranch or our future. Something that's yours alone." Understanding dawned in Nora's eyes. "You're a very sweet man," she said softly, "but truly I don't need an elaborate gift. Having you, having this life we're building, that's my gift." While her words reassured him, Levi remained determined to find something meaningful. The answer came to him unexpectedly 2 days later, as he was checking on the wild Mustang herd that had been spotted increasingly closer to the ranch as the winter deepened. Among the herd was a mare he hadn't noticed before, smaller than the others, with unusual markings that reminded him of a paint horse, but with a refinement that suggested mixed heritage. She was beautiful, moving with a grace that caught the eye, and seemed less wary of human presence than the rest of the herd. As he watched, the mare separated slightly from the others, grazing alone at the edge of the group. The lead stallion appeared unconcerned, focused on keeping the main herd together rather than disciplining the independent mare. An idea began to form in Levi's mind, challenging, perhaps even foolhardy, but potentially perfect. If he could capture that mare, gentle her, train her as a riding horse for Nora, it would be a gift unlike any other, one that combined beauty, freedom, and practical value in a way that seemed perfectly suited to the woman he loved. The next morning, before dawn, Levi rode out alone, carrying a rope and a bag of oats. He found the herd in the same valley as before, still sleeping in the gray light of early morning. The mare he had his eye on was at the periphery, as he had hoped she might be. Moving with extreme caution, keeping downwind, Levi approached. He had trapped wild horses before in his younger days and knew the technique, but he was rusty, and one wrong move could spook the entire herd. Fate was with him. The mare, curious rather than afraid, allowed him to approach closer than he had expected. When she finally became alert to his presence, he was near enough to pour a small pile of oats on the ground. The mare hesitated, nostrils flaring as she caught the scent of the treat. Hunger and curiosity won out over caution. As she lowered her head to investigate the oats, Levi moved with the lightning reflexes that had made him respected as a horseman throughout the county. The rope settled around her neck, and though she reared and struggled initially, His calm, firm handling soon convinced her that fighting was futile. Leading her carefully away from the still sleeping herd, Levi felt a mixture of triumph and respect for the beautiful animal now tethered to his own horse. She followed reluctantly, but without the panic or aggression that would have made the journey back to the ranch dangerous. He brought her not to the main corral, where her presence would be immediately noticed, but to a smaller enclosure at the far edge of the property, a round pen he sometimes used for breaking particularly difficult horses. There was shelter, water, and good grazing, and it was far enough from the main buildings that Nora was unlikely to discover his surprise before he was ready to reveal it. Over the next several days, Levi divided his time between the wedding preparations and secret visits to the captured mare. She proved more receptive to handling than he had dared hope, suggesting she might have had some human contact in her past, perhaps as a foal before escaping or being released to join the wild herd. By Christmas Eve, the mare was accepting a saddle and bridle without protest, though she remained spirited and would require an experienced rider. Levi had no doubt that Nora, with her natural gift for horses, would form a bond with the mare quickly. As the sun set on Christmas Eve, the ranch was transformed. Lanterns glowed from every window of the main house, and a large pine tree, cut from the north ridge as planned, stood in the corner of the sitting room, decorated with the ribbons, pine cones, and paper stars that Nora had crafted to replicate her childhood traditions. The ranch hands and their families gathered for the traditional Christmas Eve supper, the long table in the dining room barely accommodating the festive crowd. Rosa had outdone herself, preparing a feast that included roast turkey, her famous tamales, several side dishes, and 3 different pies for dessert. As they ate and celebrated, Levi found himself watching Nora, marveling at how seamlessly she had become part of the ranch community. She laughed with Miguel's children, exchanged recipes with Rosa, and discussed cattle breeding with the older hands as comfortably as if she had been there for years rather than months. "You're staring," she whispered when she caught his eye across the table. "Can't help it," Levi replied, not bothering to deny it. "You're beautiful, and tomorrow you'll be my wife." Nora's cheeks flushed prettily, and she ducked her head with a smile that made Levi's heart race. How had he gotten so lucky? What had he done to deserve this woman who combined strength and gentleness, independence and devotion in such perfect measure? After the meal, as tradition dictated, Rosa's youngest granddaughter read the nativity story from the Bible, her small voice carrying clearly in the hushed room. Then gifts were exchanged, small tokens for the children, practical items for the adults, all given and received with genuine appreciation. When only Levi and Nora remained by the fire, the last guests having departed with wishes for a happy wedding day, they exchanged their own gifts as Nora had described from her childhood, one each on Christmas Eve, the rest to wait until morning. Nora presented Levi with a leather-bound journal, its cover tooled with an intricate design of horses running across an open plain. "For your thoughts," she explained. "You mentioned once that you used to keep a journal during the war, that it helped make sense of things. I thought perhaps you might want to start again, not for the difficult memories, but for the good ones we'll make together." Touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift, and the memory it recalled a late-night conversation months ago that she had preserved and acted upon, Levi ran his fingers over the fine leather. "It's perfect," he said honestly. "Thank you." His gift to Nora was similarly personal, a silver locket on a delicate chain, simple but elegant. Inside was a miniature portrait of her father, painstakingly copied from a daguerreotype she kept among her few possessions, the work done by an artist in San Francisco that Levi had commissioned through Mr. Harrison. the horse buyer. Nora gasped when she opened it, tears filling her eyes as she gazed at the familiar face rendered in exquisite detail. "How did you?" "I borrowed the picture from your trunk," Levi admitted. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted him to be part of tomorrow somehow." "Oh, Levi," Nora whispered, carefully closing the locket and pressing it to her heart. "It's the most precious gift anyone has ever given me." She rose from her chair and came to him, settling onto his lap with a naturalness that still surprised and delighted him. Her kiss was tender, a promise of deeper passion to come, but tempered by the awareness of the ceremony that would make their union official the next day. "I should go," she said eventually, reluctantly pulling away. "It's bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the wedding." Levi chuckled, stroking a strand of hair away from her face. "I think that's only on the wedding day itself. Besides, aren't you staying here tonight? The cabin is already closed up." "Rosa insisted I stay with her family in town," Nora explained. "She says it's tradition for the bride to prepare away from the groom. Miguel is waiting to drive me there now." Though disappointed, Levi understood the older woman's adherence to tradition. "One last night apart, then," he conceded, helping Nora to her feet. "But tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Nora agreed, her eyes bright with promise. "Tomorrow I'll be your wife." The words sent a thrill through him that was equal parts joy, desire, and profound gratitude. "And I'll be your husband," he replied, the commitment solid and right in his heart. After Nora had departed with Miguel, Levi made one final trip to check on the mare in the round pen. She greeted him with a soft nickering, accepting the apple he offered with delicate lips. In the moonlight, her coat gleamed silver white, the dark markings creating a pattern like shadows on snow. "Tomorrow you meet your new mistress," Levi told the horse, patting her neck. "Be good to her and she'll be good to you. That's how it works with Nora. She gives back more than she takes always." The mare snorted, as if in agreement, then returned to munching the winter grass that grew sparse but nutritious along the fence line. Satisfied that all was in order, Levi returned to the main house, to the empty bed that would be empty no longer after tomorrow's ceremony. Christmas Day dawned clear and cold, the kind of crisp winter morning that made the air taste like crystallized sunshine. Levi was up before the sun, too restless to sleep, too filled with anticipation to remain idle. He bathed and shaved with particular care, then donned the new suit that had been delivered from the tailor in town, the previous week dark blue wool, with a silver waistcoat that Rosa had declared brought out the color of his eyes. His hands, usually so steady whether handling a gun or a horse, trembled slightly as he tied his string tie and combed his hair. By mid-morning, the ranch was once again filled with guests arriving for the wedding. The minister came early, a jovial man with a booming voice who clapped Levi on the shoulder and pronounced him the luckiest man in California to be marrying that remarkable young woman. Levi couldn't disagree. As the appointed hour approached, he took his place before the fireplace in the sitting room, which had been arranged to accommodate the wedding guests with rows of chairs borrowed from all over the ranch. Miguel stood beside him as his best man, uncharacteristically formal in a borrowed suit that strained slightly across his broad shoulders. A hush fell over the gathering as Rosa's oldest daughter began to play the piano that had been Levi's one luxury purchase for the ranch years earlier. The simple melody filled the room, and all heads turned toward the doorway. And then Nora appeared, and Levi forgot to breathe. She wore a dress of deep ivory satin, its simple lines accentuating her slender figure without ostentation. Her hair was arranged in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck, with a few curls left loose to frame her face. Around her neck gleamed the silver locket he had given her the night before. But it was her expression that truly captured him, the radiant joy in her eyes, the certainty in her smile as her gaze found his across the room. Rosa's husband, a dignified man with silver-streaked black hair, escorted Nora down the makeshift aisle. They had decided together that, since her father couldn't be present, having someone who had shown her kindness and respect since her arrival in Paso Robles would be fitting. When they reached the front of the room, Rosa's husband placed Nora's hand in Levi's with a formal nod that carried all the gravity of the moment. Levi felt the slight tremble in her fingers, matching his own nervousness, and squeezed gently in reassurance. The minister began the ceremony with words about love and commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage and the responsibilities it entailed. But Levi heard them as if from a distance, his attention focused entirely on Nora, on the miracle of her standing beside him, choosing to join her life with his. When the time came for their vows, Levi spoke from the heart, his voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. "Nora, I take you as my wife, to love and cherish all the days of my life. I promise to respect your strength and independence, to support your dreams as you have supported mine, to be your partner in all things. Whatever life brings, we will face it together, equal in our commitment to each other and to the life we build." Tears shimmered in Nora's eyes as she responded, her voice clear and certain. "Levi, I take you as my husband, freely and with joy. I promise to stand by your side through all that comes, to respect and honor you, to love you with faithfulness and honesty. You have shown me what true partnership means, not possession or control, but mutual support and shared purpose. I give you my trust, my heart, and my future, knowing they are safe in your keeping." The exchange of rings, simple bands of gold that Levi had purchased in town, sealed their vows. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, inviting Levi to kiss his bride, the cheers and applause of their friends seemed to come from another world, so lost were they in each other. The celebration that followed was joyous and unrestrained. Rosa's feast was consumed with enthusiasm. Toasts were offered with increasing eloquence, or lack thereof, as the whiskey flowed freely among the ranch hands, and eventually the furniture was pushed aside to allow for dancing. Levi held Nora close as they moved together to the music from the piano, now accompanied by Miguel on a guitar and one of the younger hands with a fiddle. "Mrs. Weston," Levi murmured, still marveling at the reality of it. "How does it feel?" Nora smiled up at him, her eyes reflecting the happiness he felt in his own heart. "Wonderful," she replied, "though I think I'll need time to get used to the name." "We have all the time in the world," Levi assured her, spinning her in a gentle turn that made her dress flare around her ankles. As the afternoon wore on, and the celebration showed no signs of slowing, Levi caught Nora's eye and nodded subtly toward the door. Understanding his unspoken message, she made their excuses to Rosa, who shooed them away with a knowing smile and an assurance that she would oversee the continued festivities. Hand in hand, they slipped outside into the winter sunshine. Levi led Nora not toward the main house, as she clearly expected, but toward the distant round pen where his surprise waited. "Where are we going?" Nora asked, curious but trusting as she followed him across the ranch property. "I have another gift for you," Levi explained, unable to contain his excitement. "A wedding gift, something I hope will be worthy of you." As they approached the round pen, the mare came into view, her distinctive markings visible even from a distance. Nora stopped in her tracks, her hand tightening around Levi's. "Levi," she breathed, her eyes wide. "Is that?" "From the wild herd," he confirmed, watching her face carefully for her reaction. "I captured her a few days ago, been working with her since." She's spirited but intelligent, like someone else I know." Nora approached the fence slowly, her wedding dress trailing in the winter grass. The mare watched her with alert interest, neither afraid nor aggressive, her ears pricked forward in curiosity. "She's beautiful," Nora said softly, extending her hand palm up for the horse to investigate. The mare stretched her neck, nostrils flaring as she took in Nora's scent. After a moment of consideration, she moved forward, allowing Nora to gently stroke her nose. "What's her name?" "I thought you should name her," Levi said, leaning against the fence as he watched the immediate connection forming between woman and horse. "She's yours if you want her. Your own mare, not just a ranch horse you work with." Nora looked from the horse to Levi, her expression full of wonder and gratitude. "Really? You're giving her to me?" Levi nodded, pleased by her obvious delight. "Every ranch wife should have her own horse. And this one seems made for you, independent, beautiful, with a bit of wildness that needs understanding, not breaking." Nora laughed, recognizing the parallels he was drawing. "You're a very perceptive man, Levi Weston." She turned back to the mare, studying her thoughtfully. "Liberty," she decided after a moment. "Her name is Liberty." "It suits her," Levi agreed, opening the gate to the pen and entering with careful movements. The mare Liberty accepted his approach calmly, already accustomed to his presence. "Would you like to ride her?" "I've got her saddle in the shed there." Nora glanced down at her wedding dress, then back at the horse with such longing that Levi couldn't help but laugh. "Perhaps not in that dress," he conceded. "Tomorrow, then, we have plenty of time." "Tomorrow," Nora agreed, giving the mare a final pat before allowing Levi to secure the gate. And all the days after that. They returned to the main house, which was quieter now as the wedding guests began to depart with final congratulations and good wishes. Rosa had left a cold supper for them in the kitchen, along with a note explaining that she would return the day after tomorrow to help clean up, giving the newlyweds time alone. As evening fell, bringing with it a gentle snowfall that blanketed the ranch in pristine white, Levi and Nora retired to the main bedroom, their bedroom now. The awkwardness Levi had half expected didn't materialize. Instead, there was a tender certainty to their movements as they helped each other undress, as they discovered each other fully for the first time. Levi was careful, conscious of Nora's previous experiences with marriage, wanting nothing but joy for her in this new beginning. His patience was rewarded as she blossomed under his touch, her initial hesitation giving way to passion that matched his own. Afterward, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Nora's head resting on his chest and his arms wrapped securely around her, Levi felt a sense of completion he had never known before. This was what he had been seeking all those years ago when he headed west after the war, not just land or success or independence, but this connection, this belonging, this home created between two people who had found in each other the answer to questions they hadn't even known how to ask. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness, not sure if Nora was still awake, but she stirred against him, tilting her face up to press a kiss to the underside of his jaw. "I love you too," she murmured. "Merry Christmas, husband." "Merry Christmas, wife," Levi returned, tightening his arms around her as they drifted toward sleep, the first night of many they would spend together in the years to come. Epilogue: 5 years later, the summer heat lay heavy over the ranch, the kind of dry, intense warmth that made the distant mountains shimmer like mirages against the blue sky. In the shade of the great oak tree beside the main house, Levi Weston leaned against the trunk, watching as Nora guided their son through the basics of grooming a placid old mare who stood patient under the child's inexpert ministrations. "Gentle, Samuel," Nora instructed, her hand covering the 4-year-olds to demonstrate the proper pressure for the brush. "Like this, see? Daisy likes it when you're gentle." Samuel's face, so like his father's in structure but with his mother's expressive green eyes, was a study in concentration as he tried to mimic Nora's movements. "Like this, Mama?" he asked, his small voice serious. "Perfect," Nora praised, dropping a kiss on the top of his dark head. "You're a natural horseman, just like your father." The boy beamed at the compliment, then noticed Levi watching from the shade. "Papa, look, I'm grooming Daisy all by myself." "I see that," Levi called back, his chest swelling with pride and love for his son. "You'll be running this ranch before we know it." Nora glanced up, catching Levi's eye with a smile that still had the power to take his breath away, even after years of marriage. The sunlight caught the auburn highlights in her hair, now worn in a practical braid for ranch work, but still as beautiful as the day he had first seen her. From inside the house came the sound of a baby's cry, followed by Rosa's voice singing a Spanish lullaby. Their daughter, Catherine, just 6 months old, was waking from her nap. "I'll go," Levi said, pushing away from the tree. "You two finish your lesson." Inside the cool darkness of the house, he found Rosa already cradling Catherine, who had settled at the sound of the older woman singing but was clearly hungry. Rosa handed the baby to Levi with practiced ease. "She has a good set of lungs, this one," Rosa observed with approval. "Strong, like her mother." Levi couldn't disagree as he gazed down at his daughter's face, already showing signs of the beauty she would one day possess. "Thank you for watching her, Rosa. I don't know what we'd do without you." Rosa waved away his gratitude. "Where else would I be? These children are like my own grandchildren." She bustled toward the door. "I'll send Nora in. The little señorita is hungry, I think." Left alone with his daughter, Levi moved to the rocking chair by the window, gently bouncing Catherine as she began to fuss again. "Patience, little one," he murmured. "Mama's coming." As if summoned by his words, Nora appeared in the doorway, slightly breathless from hurrying. "Is she hungry?" she asked, already unbuttoning the top of her dress as she crossed to take the baby from Levi's arms. "Starving, by the sound of it," Levi confirmed, watching as Nora settled into the rocker with Catherine, who latched onto her breast with enthusiastic determination. Just like her brother was at that age. Nora smiled down at their daughter, stroking the fine dark hair that promised to be as thick and wavy as her own. "Samuel is showing Daisy to Rosa's granddaughter," she explained. "He's very proud of his grooming skills." "As he should be," Levi agreed, perching on the arm of the rocker to watch his wife and daughter. "He's got your way with horses." "And your stubborn determination," Nora countered with a teasing smile. "Did you finish the letter to Mr. Harrison?" Levi nodded. "It's ready to go out with tomorrow's mail. He's agreed to take 6 of this year's colts, including that troublesome bay you finally gentled. Says his clients in San Francisco are always asking specifically for Weston Ranch horses now." The pride in his voice was justified. In the 5 years since their marriage, the ranch had flourished beyond his most optimistic expectations. Nora's skill with horses had proven to be not just a personal talent, but a business advantage, allowing them to take on and successfully train animals that other breeders would have deemed too difficult. Their reputation had spread throughout California and beyond, bringing buyers from as far away as Oregon and Nevada. But more important than the ranch's success was the family they had built together. Samuel's birth 3 years into their marriage had been a joy unlike anything Levi had experienced, and Catherine's arrival had only deepened that feeling. Watching Nora as a mother patient, loving, firm when needed but never harsh had made him fall in love with her all over again. "What are you thinking about?" Nora asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "How lucky I am," Levi replied honestly. "How different things might have been if I hadn't gone to town that day, if I hadn't been at the auction." Nora's expression softened at the reference to their beginning. "I've thought about that too," she admitted. "About all the little choices and chances that led us here." She looked down at Catherine, who had fallen asleep at her breast, milk-drunk and content. "I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts. They brought me to you, to this life, to our children." Levi leaned down to kiss her gently, still marveling at how right it felt, how perfectly they fit together. "No regrets, then?" he asked, already knowing the answer but wanting to hear it anyway. "None," Nora assured him, her free hand reaching up to touch his face. "Every day with you is a gift, Levi Weston, one I never take for granted." From outside came the sound of Samuel's laughter, bright and carefree in the summer afternoon. Inside, Catherine slept peacefully in her mother's arms. And between them, binding them together, was a love that had begun with an act of rescue but had grown into something far more profound, a partnership of equals, a shared life built on respect and understanding, a home created not just of wood and stone but of hearts joined in common purpose. As Levi gazed at his wife and daughter, then out the window to where his son played under the watchful eye of Rosa, he knew with absolute certainty that this family, this ranch, this life they had built together was the true meaning of freedom. Not the absence of bonds, but the right ones, freely chosen and gladly honored. "I love you," he said simply, the words as true now as they had been the first time he spoke them. "And I love you," Nora replied, her smile containing all the promise of their future together, bright, challenging at times, but always, always worth the journey.